Hello and welcome to our guide for Iron Juggernaut, the 6th boss in the Siege of Orgrimmar. This fight has two phases that alternate back and forth on a fixed timer. The assault phase is the main phase, which lasts for 2 minutes, and it is in this phase that the fight starts. The other phase, called the siege phase, lasts 1 minute, and during the siege phase the boss is stationary and does not need to be tanked. In the assault phase, Iron Juggernaut uses several abilities. Flame Vents is a frontal cone attack that deals fire damage and applies a stacking debuff on affected players, increasing the amount of fire damage they take. Just face Iron Juggernaut away from the raid and have your tanks perform a tank switch. Mortar Cannon is a Shadow Crash style mechanic. The boss regularly targets a random ranged raid member with a missile that lands a few seconds later, dealing damage in an 8-yard area. The landing location is indicated by a large red circle, so it is easy to avoid. The boss regularly creates 3 small adds called crawler mines, which after a few seconds burrow partially into the ground. A few seconds after that, they detonate, dealing very high raid-wide damage. It is possible to prevent these detonations if a player steps on a crawler mine by clicking it, which instead causes that player to take a very large amount of damage and be knocked up into the air. The tank who is currently not tanking the boss should be able to handle all 3 mines every time, but in the event of an emergency, another player with good damage reduction cooldowns can help. The boss also deals some unavoidable fire damage to random raid members with an ability called Laser Burn. This also applies an undispellable fire damage dot on affected players. Just heal through this damage. His only other ability during this phase is called Border Drill, which creates small earth ripples that move around and deal high damage to anyone who comes in contact with them. Just make sure to avoid these. 2 minutes after the start of the assault phase, the boss enters the siege phase for 1 minute. He becomes stationary and he does not need to be tanked. He uses 6 abilities. The boss retains his Crawler Mines ability from the assault phase, which should be handled identically. Seismic Activity is a constant raid-wide damaging aura that just needs to be healed through. Shock Pulse knocks all raid members back a very great distance from the boss and also damages them mildly. Given the very large size of the area where you fight the boss, this knockback can be quite problematic as it can put players out of range of healers. To counter this mechanic, you should find a positioning where most or all raid members can have a solid obstacle behind them so that they do not get knocked back. You can see an example of this right now, but you can look around and pick your own places. The boss creates explosive tar void zones on the ground, which deal damage to any players who stand in them and slow these players down. Just make sure you're not standing in them. Iron Juggernaut's final ability in this phase is Cutter Laser. He chases a random raid member around with a laser beam, and if the laser beam touches an explosive tar void zone, the void zone explodes and deals high raid-wide damage. The laser beam also deals high damage at the point of impact. Anyone being chased by Cutter Laser needs to make absolutely sure not to kite it into any explosive tar void zones. The 2 phases continue to alternate in this way until the end of the fight. We recommend using Heroism or Bloodlust right at the start of the fight. For a more detailed and constantly updated written version of this guide, go to the link in the description. Thank you for watching.